We have a very special guest on the line right now, MK Dr. Einat Wilf of the Independence Party. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
To be honest with you, I did not know a lot about you. The first time I heard you speak publicly in English was at the Glenn Beck dinner, when Glenn Beck was here. That was the first time I heard you speak, and you did a great job.
Thank you.
You said, and this was great, I thought it was amazing, you said even though, you turned to Glenn Beck and said even though you don't agree with everything Beck says, you said that you are willing to stand with anyone who stands with Israel. So, number one, I was extremely impressed by your comments that evening.
Thank you.
And also, I'm going to admit right here and right now, I would say I'm a supporter of more right-leaning parties. I know you're with the Independence Party. But nevertheless, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on. While we probably don't agree with all issues, just like you probably don't agree with everything Glenn Beck says, that being said, I think our listeners really could benefit from having you on the show and listening to a lot of the things you have to say. So now I'm going to turn to UNRWA. Last week in the Jerusalem Post, and for those of you who don't know, UNRWA is the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. You said that UNRWA is one of the greatest stumbling blocks to the peace process. Here's a quote: "When I hear a Palestinian say that there's a right of return into the sovereign state of Israel, I question whether they want peace and accept the idea of a two-state solution." That's pretty intense, and a pretty intense quote, in my opinion, that in your belief, when you hear them say right of return, essentially they're saying they don't recognize Israel's right to exist, and they're not into the two-state solution. Can you comment on that?
Exactly. I mean, I think when you ask generally people around the world, well-meaning people who support the two-state solution, what is the greatest stumbling block to keeping the two-state solution alive, they will say settlements. This is what this is the automatic answer.
Right.
Now, I do think that the settlement project in the West Bank and Gaza has not been Israel's wisest policy. But I do think that if the world is truly interested in keeping the two-state solution alive, it should have the same passion, determination, focus that it has to limiting the settlement project to rolling back the damage that UNRWA is doing daily to the cause of a two-state solution. And the reason, of course, is that UNRWA, under the guise of humanitarian work, is essentially perpetuating the conflict and manufacturing new refugees from the same old war, a situation that is unparalleled anywhere in the world. Now, when I talk to international audiences, I ask them a simple question. No one today disputes that in a two-state scenario, Gaza is part of the future state of Palestine. There's not an Israeli in sight, no military, no settlements. Gaza belongs to the Palestinians. So why is a baby born in Gaza today called a refugee?
Good question.
I think so,
Good
too.
question.
And I think it's a question that has no good answer if you're a believer in the two-state solution.
So UNRWA, do you believe, should be dismantled?
Well, what I propose, my proposal, and I call it restructuring UNRWA on the road to peace, because the traditional equation was the following. The traditional equation was we will get to a final status settlement. We will solve all the key issues, statehood, refugees, border security, and UNRWA will be dismantled, rolled back, after we have a full and comprehensive and final peace agreement. I say we need to change this equation. UNRWA needs to be restructured now if we are ever to make peace possible in the future.
Right.
So I'm saying the equation has been wrong and we need to change it. And the way we need to change it is we need to turn to the donor countries. UNRWA works on the mandate from the General Assembly. The General Assembly obviously will not change the mandate. So we need to go to the donor countries, which in typical fashion are the Western countries. I mean, I love the fact that out of the $1 billion budget of UNRWA, the Islamic Bank, which represents the 56 Islamic states, gives $7 million. You know, those are the countries that are hurting for their Arab brethren. And the Western countries, United States, 250 million, the European Commission, various European countries, Australia, Japan, they are funding the remainder of that budget.
Right.
Now, they are doing that truly with good intentions. They believe that they are providing humanitarian assistance. Now, what I'm saying, by all means, continue giving the money. But when you give the money to hospitals and schools and welfare, disconnect it from a refugee status. De-link it from the manufacture of more refugees. So give hospitals and welfare and education in Gaza and the West Bank, but not because the people are refugees, but because they might be needy.
So let me ask you this, going back to your quote here again, and I'm going to read your quote from the Jerusalem Post. When I hear a Palestinian say that there is a right of return, I question whether they want peace. Based on that statement, the fact that the Arabs today are still calling for a right of return, based on the incitement, which I see, I do a lot of studying into this daily, almost daily, in the official Palestinian Authority, why should Israel, in your opinion, even consider sitting down with somebody like Mahmoud Abbas, who continues to allow the glorification of martyrdom, the incitement, which is running rampant in the official Palestinian media? Why even deal with somebody who is now in bed with Hamas?
Look, like many people on the left, I have become skeptical of the Arab and the Palestinian desire to achieve peace. However, I am not willing to give up on the effort of trying. And I think this is, by the way, what characterized the old school Ben-Gurion, Mapai, which I believe we are truly continuing rather than currently, which is they were very hawkish. They had no illusions about the region in which we were living, about the intentions of our neighbors. But at the same time, they were keenly aware of the international environment, of the fact that Israel, with all our desire to think that we are a great superpower, is actually a small country in need of international support, and that it is our responsibility to seek peace. It's a biblical responsibility to seek peace whenever we can. So I think this ability at once to have no illusions and to present to the world, to say, when the Palestinians are saying that there are 5 million refugees, rather than the number that we calculated, which is 30,000. Today, there would be about 30,000 living people who were what is today Israel, before 48, that could get the title of refugees. And I will tell you even this. I think Israel should say, even the most right-wing government in Israel, I'm sure, would have no problem saying that as part of a comprehensive peace agreement, Israel would be willing to take back into its territory all the refugees, but the real ones. And the real ones are 30,000 in numbers, elderly people.
Right.
So, and I think this is what the world needs to begin to understand. There's a huge obstacle to peace here that you're overlooking, that you're underestimating, and for people like me who want to believe that sometime, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after tomorrow, there will be peace, the continued existence of this organization and its operation to manufacture new refugees every day from the same old war doesn't signal peace. So if you are putting so much emphasis on, I would want the international community that with everything, every time they say something against something in the settlement, a building being built in East Jerusalem, they should also say with the same force and passion about the fact that babies in Gaza are getting refugee status, right, about the fact that people in the West Bank, in areas of the Palestinian Authority, are getting refugee status. They are under their own government. The people in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, why are we collaborating with the Arab desire to perpetuate the conflict? So I'm not turning to the Arabs, and I have no illusions about their intentions, but I'm turning to the West for those who want to believe in peace and tell them, take a look at this obstacle. It sends a message to people who want a two-state solution that such a solution is not possible. Is this the kind of message you want sent?
I have several other topics I want to get to, but just finalizing on this topic, in terms of the so-called two-state solution, are you not afraid that a situation will arise if certain areas are turned over to a Palestinian Authority the way they are now, meaning the way they're continuing to incite, etc., that we won't have a situation where there are rockets falling on the coastal plain in Ben Gurion Airport, similarly to the way you now have between 1 and 2 million Israelis living under fire in the southern part of the country?
I certainly don't think we needed to do it anytime soon, but I do think that right now the priority should be to create an environment and to create the foundation that would make such a solution possible sometimes in the future when the geopolitical conditions are right. I'm by no means dogmatic.
Right.
As I said, I do view myself as heir to, I think, a great political tradition that was able to seek peace at the same time that it had no illusion about our situation, our neighbors, and about the geopolitics.
Gotcha.
And I think that's the ability to do both at the same time.
So I want to switch topics now if we can. 2 weeks ago, in your committee, in the Knesset, Committee for Diaspora and Absorption, you hosted somebody by the name of Stephen Cohen, the father of distancing, and that's a theory which states that young American Jews are moving away from Israel. I want your reaction to that. This is totally a different topic. Do you believe that is true or false? Are young American Jews today moving away from their ties to Israel?
So there was a bigger discussion in the committee. Steve Cohen presented his findings and his analysis of the findings. Shmuel Rosner represented pretty much the opposing view. There's one view that that's the one that Steve Cohen presented, which is there is a distancing from Israel. Shmuel Rosner presented the view that I call it Israel as classical music. People who are younger tend to be generally more distant than Israel or from Israel, and when they grow older, as they have children, it just becomes part of their identity.
Right.
So, the way that young people don't find classical music, but then they grow old and they all have season passes to the Philharmonic. We don't know. I mean, there are different views on the data. I have no doubt that the younger generation today needs to deal with a more complex Israel. They need to do it in an environment where there's constant efforts to undermine Israel, its story, its narrative, its legitimacy. It's a much more difficult environment in which to be an Israel supporter. I do think that the Israeli story is as good as ever and even better than ever, but the environment, I think, today is more difficult than it's ever been.
You are listening. I'm sorry to cut you off. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I just wanted to say, so right now the data is mixed. It's not clear how to interpret it, but clearly there are bigger challenges than in the past.
You are listening to Reality Bytes Radio with Josh Hasten. We are on the line with MK, Dr. Einat Wilf. And by the way, your English is impeccable.
Oh, thank you.
I know you studied at Harvard, you studied in the States, but I'm seeing a career down the line, perhaps as foreign minister. What do you think?
That would be very nice. Thank you.
I think, just based on my impressions from your speech there at Glenn Beck, would definitely left a big impression on me, and the things I don't agree with everything you're saying, but we can agree to disagree. But the way you're presenting your opinions, I'm gonna bet on that. I'm gonna bank on that. But I do want to get to other topics as well. You also had a Knesset committee meeting on strengthening ties between Israel and South American evangelicals. Tell us a little bit about those meetings and what came of them.
So that was part of a discussion in a subcommittee on foreign affairs. I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. They were looking at trends among evangelicals around the world. There was specific emphasis on Latin America, and what impressed me is that there were indications that the Latin American evangelicals are very much favorable towards Israel, but that the difference between them and the American evangelicals is that they don't have a tradition of translating that love, that support into political support.
Right.
But what they said is that it is beginning to happen. And this was for me very interesting because it means that 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, we could expect political change in Latin America in terms of the attitudes towards Israel, especially in a large country such as Brazil.
Right.
And this is very encouraging because we've been used to thinking in many ways of Latin America as almost a lost cause. The Jewish communities are very small. Their political impact is limited. The general sentiment comes from left-wing socialism, from large Palestinian and Arab communities, has been not traditionally, but in the last couple of decades, is not very supportive of Israel. So the idea that there were demographic trends and social trends that could change the picture completely in a decade or two was, for me, very intriguing.
That's great. That's definitely optimistic, considering the recent history of the relationship between that region and Israel. So that's great to know. I personally just wrote a book called Itamar Makes Friends, A Story of Jewish Brotherhood. It's a children's book, and I see that you also have written several books, one called My Israel, Our Generation. For those who haven't heard about it, tell us a little bit about what that book's all about.
So the first book, My Israel, Our Generation, in Hebrew it's called The Founders, Fighters, and Us. It's basically a generational and personal look at Israel's history, looking how it was for me to grow up in Israel, what events shaped my thinking about Israel, its past, its future, how I looked at previous generations, and what are the challenges of my generation going forward. So it was a kind of both a personal book, but also kind of a wider look at Israel from my generation's perspective.
Right.
And the key message was that our generation had to deal with basically some sense of loss of idealism, a more complex reality. We would look at previous generations, which seemed to be very certain, have a black and white clarity about who's right and who's wrong and what their mission in life is. And my generation is the generation which for the first time fought in the first Intifada, grew up to a very complex reality, and as a result went through a period kind of losing itself, but I think ultimately is finding its purpose, I think, understanding that yes, the defense of Israel is still important, but it's much more now a battle for Israel's soul and character.
Gotcha. So I'm going to have to pick a copy up of that. But returning seriously now to your political future, what are your plans? I mean, elections are coming around 2013. I've heard some rumors in terms of, I don't know what you want to reveal now on the air live to hundreds, if not thousands, of listeners around the world. I heard some rumors of shifting to other parties. I mean, where will Einat Wilf be, God willing, when elections come to be in 2013, if the government lasts until that point?
The rumors about joining the Likud or Labor or whatever never came from us. We are very determined to run. We are steadily increasing in the polls, beginning now to get 3 seats, which is past the threshold in a more steady fashion. And ultimately, I think we'll be able to grow to 4 and 5 and perhaps even more. Today, we are 5 in the Knesset. So and even though right now we're small, I do believe we're heirs to a very important tradition that right now perhaps is not properly represented. And call it the Ben Gurion tradition, the more hawkish side of Mapai. And we will run again, and I'm sure we will be able to get support from, I think, kind of centrist, serious, deep-thinking individuals.
Again, I've said it before. I definitely do not agree with everything, but that being said, I still think, based on what I've seen in your recent past, again, I'm new to Dr. M.K. Einat Wilf. I think you're going far. That's my prediction. I think foreign ministry is the place for you. I mean, I know I talk on this show a lot about making Israel's case in the world media, and we need those spokespeople on the mic, on television, making Israel's case, and I think you would be perfect for that. Even if we disagree on certain issues, is that something you would look?
Very kind.
No problem. I know. I mean it. Is that something? I'm not here just to flatter you. I mean, if I didn't think so, I wouldn't say it. But especially with the Beck talk, how your honesty and you said it like it was. Mr. Beck, I don't agree with anything you're saying, but a friend of Israel is a friend of mine, and I definitely agree with that. I also personally, I wrote a column following that event, and also got some heat from those people who were saying, he's not a friend, and we shouldn't have anything to do with him. But I personally disagree. Anyone who's willing to literally, in some cases, risk their lives defending the state of Israel, I think deserves our support. Even if we don't agree with everything they say. So I'm going to say the same thing to you. And only good things for you for many years to come. And good luck advancing your platforms, and good luck advancing your political career. We'll definitely stay tuned. And I'd love to have you on the show again in the future. This is a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of important information. And that UNRWA thing, as we know, UNRWA, in my opinion, UNRWA's got to go. And they're, again, as you said, perpetuating the conflict even more, not helping those who need help, not sincerely, and just wanting to have the conflict continue. They're not looking to end anything anytime soon.
Exactly.
So
this is a campaign, and I definitely plan always to contribute to representing Israel in every and each way that I can.
Dr. MK Einat Wilf, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to have you on again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye.